Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road towards the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and, well, crocodile tears. In the corner by the fire are 3 people. One of them is insisting that a crying giraffe can make a grown man cry any day, and yes, that's me, your co-host, Christina Brown. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories so that we can better understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. We all know the power of words, written, spoken. We know they contain a power so immense that God himself refers to himself as the Word in Scripture. But images speak too, very, very powerfully. This is why small children's literature most often includes illustrations alongside text. Together, these powerful methods of learning ignite the imagination of a child in extraordinary ways. So, our question today is, what should we do with the now very popular wordless picture books? Here's the question. Today we live in a culture where learning how to read is not only a prized skill in small children, but arguably a necessary skill for survival in the 21st century. So, why should we invest in wordless picture books? Isn't it a waste of time, talent, and valuable resources? And what about the child who refuses to learn to read? Are wordless picture books a handicap to that child who spurns his reading lessons in favor of wordless images? Well, let's find out. My co-hosts Mandy and Matt are here with me today to talk about these very exciting questions. Welcome, you guys.
Hello.
Hi.
So Christina, do you feel confident about your intro, walking a path along instead of walking along a path?
You know, I do. I feel like I pulled it off quite well.
Okay. Listeners, we had a discussion in the green room about whether it's walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak or walking along a path. So I prefer walking a path along. But if you disagree, Christina, I mean, you do whatever you feel comfortable with the intro.
Absolutely not. I just feel like we've mixed it up so many times, I don't know up from down at this point.
I think next time I will say along a path at the foot of Pikes Peak, I'm walking.
The roots of Pikes Peak along which I walked.
Gotta love all this literary goodness. It's great. Well, guys, I'm so excited to dive in. I have been wanting to do this for a while and have just been like itching to do it. So I'll just begin. I actually don't remember many wordless picture books as a kid, but now that I have kids, they have like 10 or more. And that's actually only a handful of the wordless picture books that I've seen existing on shelves in bookstores, etc., and that are in children's literature. So I actually wanted to start asking you, did either of you encounter like many wordless picture books as kids? And if so, what was your experience with them?
I was trying to think when I was prepping for the show if I had any wordless picture books as a kid. And I don't think I had any that were designed specifically to be wordless picture books. I had some that kind of had that function for me in the way I used them, which we can get into later, but I don't think I had any like specific wordless picture books as a kid.
Okay.
Yeah, and even farther back in history, when I was a kid, I also did not. We did have books. When I was a kid.
You're so bad.
But they did not. I like Matt. I don't recall having picture books that didn't have words, but I do remember lingering on the pictures and really spending time with the pictures. And I have more to say on that later, in particular for when I had young kids and the books that we had. But I remember, like, for example, my favorite book, and this isn't even a picture book, but Charlotte's Web. In my head right now, I don't know about you guys, but I can see that first picture where she's tugging on her dad. Fern is tugging on her dad's arm. with the axe, like, don't kill Wilbur.
Yeah.
And so I like all the pictures were very indelible to me, and they were part of the story. But
Yeah.
I don't know if they made any way back in the 70s.
Sure. You mean like around the time of the Gutenberg press?
Yeah, back in the
Back in the time where they did actually have books.
before recorded time.
Well, it's interesting. I didn't realize until, again, I had kids, and I realized there were so many wordless picture books in the market. But I did encounter one as a kid that I remember, like, just super powerfully. And when I got pregnant with my first, I immediately was like, oh, I need to find this. Well, okay, maybe not immediately. I had other things on my mind, like, how the heck am I going to do this? But that's, neither here nor there. But I remembered this book, and it was the story of Noah's Ark, illustrated by Peter Spire. And I believe it's Spire. It's Dutch, so it could be Spear, but I believe it's Spire. I was raised in a Christian home, and I knew the basics of that story pretty early, of course. But in Spire's illustrations, he actually explored what it might have looked like to be Noah. So he drew depictions of Noah struggling to get the animals on board. He drew him exhausted after many days in a dark ship. There was animal dung everywhere, and a single candle was burning. His head was in his hands. Anyway, it really just seemed like Noah came alive. He drew the joy on Noah's face when he embraced his wife as the floods receded. And then the last picture was Noah planting a vineyard on his hands and knees with the rainbow arcing over. And there was just something about it that really, really pulled at my imagination. But what really got me was actually the animals in the rain after the doors were closed. They had this expression on their faces that was so sad, like they knew what was happening and doom was approaching. And it was the giraffes. The giraffes were crying.
So you mentioned a grown man crying. Are you outing your husband, Brian?
No, I'm saying make a grown man cry. I'm definitely using that phrase in the generic. I am arguing for the fact that this illustration was so powerful. Watching a little giraffe cry that it would make any of us cry.
It would make me cry.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I remember that book as a girl. That image made me cry every time. And when I got it for my kids, and I was reading it to them, I actually was tearing up. I'm like, gosh, this gets me every time. But you really are thinking about what was it like? And so anyway, it was so, so powerful. And that was just kind of one of the reasons why wordless picture books are so important.
Mm-hmm. Particularly to you, because they impacted you in that way. And so you wanted that. It sounds to me like, I think all of us, things that impact us as children, we want to carry on to our own. So I love that.
Oh, for sure. So you're right.
The copy that you showed us, Matt and me in the green room, is that your copy from when you were a kid?
Oh, I wish. No, I don't know where that copy went. That's why, when I got pregnant with Eben, I was scouring the internet. I was like, I need to find this book again because I remembered it. I remembered those images. And anyway, I didn't remember even that particularly that it was a wordless picture book until I had gotten it again. I just remember how powerfully that spoke to me.
So, question for you, Christina. When you read this book as a kid, were you old enough to read by that point, or was this a pre-literate Christina who really loved it?
Yeah, see, that's a really good question. It was actually, I believe, a pre-literate Christina. I was the oldest in my family, and it was one of the earliest books we had. And I remember sitting on a couch, and I can't even remember the couch. You know how it is. You remember things around you, but the things you remember are what's right in front of you. And I remember this book, and I remember it being, quote unquote, read to me when I was first introduced to it. And then I picked it up as a girl, over and over again to just almost torture myself by flipping through the pages and crying every time I came to the giraffes.
Oh, that's so cute.
To see little Christina, I need a good cry. Just flip to the book.
Yes.
Yeah. But it was so interesting. His illustrations really allowed my imagination to ponder like what the unspoken details of that story could have looked like. The biblical story, like in the Bible, doesn't like give a whole bunch of details, but allowing this narrative form of illustration, it gave me some kind of visual aid and visual narrative in my imagination that words could not. So it was like a visual aid, rich imagery that allowed me to kind of piece together the story of my own past. So the interesting thing to me is, you know how they say like words paint pictures? You know that, do you know that phrase? That's what I'm saying. Well, I was thinking about this and I was like, well, pictures also paint pictures, but pictures tell stories. And so anyway, there's this like whole massive crossover, but there's also like a really distinct difference, which is interesting. So I kind of want to talk about that. But stimulating the imagination through visual images are definitely not the only benefit of wordless picture books. So I want to hear you guys talk about something else. So given that we are talking about wordless picture books and encountering them as children, do you think that a child is trained into an appreciation for visual arts by being exposed to a lot of wordless picture books? Does it help him grow up being intrigued in art museums or even more likely to attempt pieces of visual art himself?
That's a good question. That's the positive spin we could put on this, because I was thinking if I was going to put on my grumpy old man hat, right? Like,
we do love your grumpy.
Thank you. But you could see, like, we only have anecdotal data. I've been trying to look, I've been sort of Googling some stuff, trying to see if like wordless picture books have become more popular in recent years. I haven't pinned that down yet, or whether that's a thing or if it's just anecdotes that we're thinking. But you can really imagine a scenario where we say, oh, back in our day, kids used to read words, actual words, and now they just look at pictures, images from like their iPhones or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I could see that being a narrative you could spin, but there is that other thing. Maybe instead of emphasizing the fact that we're not reading the words as much, maybe we are looking at pictures more. Maybe we can foster a greater appreciation of the visual arts. Mandy, I'm handing the baton to you.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I definitely think that it trains children's brains. I think of, and I think there are a lot of parents who do this now, but when my girls were babies, we taught them sign language so that they could ask for food. You know, we taught them please, thank you, hungry, thirsty, eat, drink, more, things like that. And so there's something magical when a child can sort of go beyond whatever their capability is with words. And I think that's what not only wordless picture books, but any children's book where the illustrations are magnificent, I think that adds to the story. And I mean, my girls absolutely loved going to museums, and in the same way that they loved reading picture books. And the art curriculum that we used, because I was a homeschooler, the art curriculum we used, when we would look at paintings, it guided the discussion into like what is happening in the picture. And I don't think it's ever too early to really prick a child's curiosity and allow them to see what they see instead of telling them what they see. So
yeah.
So that's a yes. That was my answer.
I love it. That sounds like the voice or like that's a yes from me or something like that. Like the judges sit down like
that's like a yes for me, dog.
Yes for me. No, but I think that's absolutely correct. I love. Again, I don't know why wordless picture books seem to be a thing now, or maybe like Matt said, you know, like you were researching like just now and Googling.
I think based on my rapid Googling they are going through more of a resurgence in popularity now in like the past decade.
Good. Okay, so
that's not based on no data, but it is based on next to no data. So
do your kids, Matt, have any wordless picture books that you're aware of?
So we have the one that is a mostly wordless book that our kids have always loved is Goodnight Gorilla.
Love Goodnight Gorilla.
I love Goodnight Gorilla too. My kids would just have me read it over and over again to them. Mm-hmm. So that is a book where it describes a gorilla letting himself and other animals out of the zoo and like following the zookeeper home, and it's very cute. And the only dialogue is good night, then some animal. So good night gorilla, good night hyena, good night lion. So the only dialogue is people saying good night to each other.
Right.
And it is great. So a couple things that I especially love about Goodnight Gorilla. First of all, the artist hit a lot of like little things to look for. So like if you read it enough dozens of times, like I have, you notice like, oh, there's a little mouse holding a banana in every single photo, or oh, in every picture there's a red balloon, which gets gradually farther and farther away from the shot.
Yeah.
And I love there's all these little
yeah, the progress of the balloon was like my girl's favorite thing.
Exactly. Like it rewards close observation. And then like even when my kids were too young to read, I could ask them like, all right, buddy, what's happening in this picture? And they'd have to describe what's happening in the picture to me. Yes. So they have to look at what's happening, like read the body language, notice any like little nuances, and infer what's happening in the broader context of the story. So that's kind of a lot of work to do when you're like 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah, and that's kind of like I want to bring that point into it because it is a lot of work, but it's like very natural, I think, to the child. I think children are always kind of like you said, Mandy, like way more curious than I think a lot of adults assume they are. Pricking that curiosity, as you said, like it's just beautiful to watch because they're so ready for it. But I kind of wanted to think, like, as you were talking, Matt, and you were talking about reading your kids this book and asking your kids to, you kind of like rewarding them with like, what do you see? I'm kind of thinking that, like, I know you guys are very, very intentional parents, and I hope I am too, but like, I kind of wonder about, part of what's been exciting me about the wordless picture books is that even for children who don't necessarily grow up in homes that have that kind of intentional parenting, they still have that power, like themselves, to look through these books and to start telling themselves a story and having that, I guess, like empowering feeling of being able to be the master of a story or the master of a narrative. Like gives them confidence, like helps them build a world. Gives them this sense of like enchantment and imagination. And of course, if this child is, like behind or can't read, I don't know. I just feel like there's something about the resurgence of wordless picture books that really is good for our society in its current place.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what you guys think about that.
Well, I think it's good. It's good for neurodivergent kids too, because like, and
that was the cool world I was going for, and I couldn't find that word.
And I would think it's also good, like, if parents and educators are paying attention, if there's a child that's really behind in reading, but they can grasp what's going on in the story by the pictures, I would think that would be really helpful to say, okay, wait a minute, this child isn't just straight up behind, they're struggling with this specific aspect. And then maybe it would help with testing. And diagnostics like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what's so exciting to me about this. And I know, Mandy, I did want to ask you specifically because I know you were a teacher. Were you in elementary school or
no?
No? Okay.
I was high school.
High school, okay.
I mean, I homeschooled my elementary children. But
I think you'd be a great elementary school teacher. But
oh, honey. Okay, let's just, I like very small groups of small children, but when you get, I can't do classroom management. So actually what I used to do though, I I would do story time at schools and stuff like that. So I would go read stories because I can read upside down.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, so I need to tell you all about
That's
this. So
Oh.
my one son is in first grade. So my wife goes to like one of the parent teacher conferences, like talk about his progress, and his teacher, first grade teacher, it has like a little story that my son wrote, and he's in first grade, so it's all very phonetic and misspelled, but it's phonetic
I
and it's
need to
extremely
see it.
cute.
I need to see it.
And as the teacher is talking to Danielle, she's just breezing through it upside down, looking over it, phonetic misspelled. It's like a first grade teacher superpower. She does that, and Dan's like, how are you doing this?
Yeah, no, it's so much better because then you don't have to read it and then turn the picture around. So it's a very important
Yep.
picture book skill. But anyway, sorry, Christina. So no, I don't want to teach elementary school, but I will do story time. I'm just putting this out there. I miss having children in my house. So any little play group, just contact Anselm. Let them know. I will come. I am not. Y'all are laughing. I am so serious right now. I am serious. I will
Dude,
come
he's so
read
cute.
stories. I love reading stories.
Dude, I would totally institute story time at Mandy's.
Let's do it.
That would be so cool. Like, I'm not even kidding. Wow. All right. Off podcast.
What were you going to say?
That's awesome. But where were we? I'm trying to think.
You were going to ask me something because you thought I was a teacher of elementary, and then
it was that I couldn't remember if you taught elementary.
Okay.
Yes. But no, I think for me, like, let's see, where was I? I need to try to find. We get so derailed so easily. That's the problem with being such good friends on podcasts.
But it's also the fun part.
It is the fun part, unless maybe the audience saying, "Okay, get to the point, guys."
Nah, we're laughing.
We love you, audience.
Yeah. Sorry. We were talking about, I was saying that maybe it's helpful for parents and teachers if the kid is following the story without the words. And then that's seemed to inspire something.
Yeah, and a couple things related to that I was thinking of is it gets kids more confident in just having a book.
Yeah.
Because, again, some kids either they don't like to read, they get it in their head, they can't read well, or maybe they're just having some trouble getting started reading.
Right.
And that's a good way to get them with books. So that's at least a step in the right direction. Right. And another one that I think is very important is they teach kids how to pay close attention to something for a long period of time. It's
attention.
We can complain and then look in the mirror and realize we do the same thing about just like looking at our phones and like this stream of digital images. But if it's a picture book, it's on a piece of paper and you're supposed to look at one thing quietly for a long time.
Right.
That's a very good skill for young children to have. And especially, I'm thinking a book series that I really loved when I was a kid. They're not technically picture books, but they're kind of in that same, they get the same areas of the brain fired up, or Where's Waldo books.
Oh, yeah.
So I would get...
Same with I Spy.
Yeah, I mean, that they have some words, but they're more decorative. But Waldo is so good for a couple different reasons. One is, gives you the game of, finding Waldo, but that's almost beside the point because, once you're like 8 or 9, you can find him really easily and it's not a big deal. But the thing that really helps me with Waldo, and we got our kids the Waldo books and I still like looking through them, is they really reward close attention and they reward looking at something again and again, because each picture is just like loaded with lots of little jokes, lots of little insights into the world that they do.
Yep.
You can look at each picture for a very, very long time and not get bored. And that's a really, really important thing to teach kids, to focus on one thing for a long time with the confidence that doing that will be rewarding.
Yeah, I like that.
Can I also tell you one thing?
Oh.
Did I ever... I don't think I ever told you this, but I found Waldo in the land of Waldos.
What?
Oh, I did too, actually.
Oh, okay, well, it's not as special then. I had to. So in high school, me and my brother, we could never find Waldo in the land of Waldos. So the thing, it's a land filled with Waldos. The only thing, the true Waldo is missing his right shoe.
Okay.
So that's the only thing you had to go on.
I don't even know what
So
you
me and
are
my brother
talking
were in
about.
high school,
So,
and we could never find Waldo in the land of Waldos as kids. We're like, all right, we're doing this now. So we printed off the page, and we each got like a pen. And as I was sitting in class in high school, I go through each was like, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it.
we're
And
in
finally,
class.
In class in high
yeah,
school.
and finally, my brother runs up and pounds on the glass outside my class and says, I found Waldo. And it was just a wonderful moment.
See, I knew about the Waldo books, but I didn't know about the land of Waldo. This is a new
Oh,
thing
you should
for
check
me.
it out on the internet, Mandy. It's hardcore.
Okay.
But anyway, it taught me
It
as
taught
a
you,
teenager and a young boy to pay attention to something for a very long time.
clearly.
Pay attention, Pond.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a Doctor Who reference for those who didn't get it.
That is the one show I have not become addicted to.
Ah, very nice. Very nice. Oh, but back to the paying attention and being rewarded for paying attention. The other thing that I really was thinking about with wordless picture books is, you know how like if you have like the words plus the text, right? Kind of like what I was talking about in the beginning of the podcast, you have both words and pictures, which are both very powerful communicators in and of their own right. And together they can really bring power, so to speak, for very bad description power. For me, I'm doing terribly as a descriptor. I need someone to write a wordless picture book about how I am talking on this podcast.
We need
A wordless picture podcast.
We need a wordless podcast. That's what we need. You're not doing terrible. I'm tracking you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm glad you're tracking. Okay. But anyway, so together they're very powerful. And then children's books, illustrations, they have the text and the illustration. But the illustrations are select, right? So the illustrator will work with the author and will pick the illustrations that they want for the page, right? So like, okay, well, what do we really want to illustrate in this part, or what about this part? And of course they have to work with the editor and the layout, but basically they have to choose, right? Whereas like a wordless picture book actually has to be an entire narrative. So it's actually very different in the way that an illustrator has to approach a wordless picture book, because he or she is the storyteller, right? Mm-hmm. So I love that. And so I got to thinking about that, and I was thinking, okay, like, as an artist, visual artist, someone who's creating these visual stories, they have to have their own kind of world building experience. It's not quite the right word, but they have to have their own understanding of story, and they have to be able to convey that to a reader, or say a child, right? Who can interpret that, their whole series of art, their whole series of illustrations into the story that they were trying to tell. So it's this whole like other interesting dynamic that I find is really intriguing, and it really kind of is training both adults and children alike how to tell and understand stories. And so anyway, I was just wondering if you guys had any comments on that. It's just really fascinating to me that's just, yeah.
I am so pitifully not a visual artist that I can't even conceive of it. But I know, Matthew, you once had a dream of being a comic book artist. So maybe this is more in your lane.
Oh, yes. I didn't even think about comic books. Silly me. Yes. Do expand, Matthew.
Yeah, well, comic books would be the marriage of the picture book and the, boring old word book. But so that is something. Yes, Mandy, it was an ambition of mine to be a comic book artist until I realized I'm pretty good at drawing, but I'm not really good. And you kind of have to be really good to be a comic book artist. So that's the rub. But yeah, something along the lines that you were talking about, Christina, is I was thinking about it. And again, you could have the grumpy old man hat back on and say like, oh, these books are so simple. You don't even have to write anything. You just draw stuff. It's like, again, you could see where the grumpy old man is coming from. But I do think it's harder to tell an effective story with just words, because you're you're kind of handicapping yourself in some respects, right? Sort of like how, we've talked on previous podcasts about radio theater and how there's specific challenges that you have when it's just audio and no visual.
Right.
Well, here it's kind of the opposite, right? Where it's only visual, no audio.
Right.
So in order to tell a story, you need to do a couple things really well. One is your pictures need to communicate all the relevant emotions, right? So like you can't write Billy was angry. You need to show him being angry and like getting ready to throw a tantrum. You need his body language to be a specific way. And also you need to be very selective about what shots you pick.
Yes.
You can't have too many, but you need enough to actually keep the story and splice everything together in the reader's mind.
And make it.
So that,
Yeah,
exactly. So having that flow without the language is really, really difficult. So yeah, again, to the grumpy old man inside of me, lighten up. Picture books are hard.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. I was also thinking too, like, it's funny how when we're adults, well, okay, here's backing up a little bit. So my son is in first grade as well. And he's, sweet kid. He's, I don't want to say struggling with reading because it's not like he's like struggling, but writing and trying to read are hard for him. And sweet little guy, he's like telling himself that he's bad at it. And so, of course, like, my mama's heart's like, honey, no, you're not. You're just learning. But it's interesting because to kids, and we talked, alluded to this earlier, but to kids that age, wordless picture books are amazing because they don't need to have that skill to back up their ability to read a book or tell themselves a story or to sit quietly in a corner, right? One of my son's favorite books is a wordless picture book, and I didn't realize that until, a couple weeks ago, and he told me, and he didn't tell me like, my favorite book is a wordless picture book, but like I was like, oh, okay. But it's interesting to me because I realized that, and I remember this as a kid too. As you're a kid and you're learning how to read, it's irritating to you when the books have less and less illustrations. But as an adult, you start to get irritated sometimes when the book has illustrations, or again, like when a book is adapted to a movie, because you're like, well, that's not how I pictured them in my head.
Right.
So I kind of wanted to be like, okay, this is a really interesting transition though. Like where does this whole idea of telling a story with pictures like insert itself into that narrative of a child longing to experience the world in visual images and an adult wanting to read and picturing their own imaginative experiences and then saying, wait, no, guys, that's not accurate. Come on, man.
Yeah, that's really interesting because that is it's like our hand is being held and we're being led into the world of the story existing in our head only.
Yeah.
Not only, but you know what I mean? Like what I see in my head only comes from words as opposed to being assisted by what's on the page. That's really interesting.
I know.
Yeah. And I think this also, I think, is a tie back to radio theater because we had discussions during that episode about how the fact that there aren't any images can be an asset because you're encouraging your listener to be more actively involved and to use their imagination and to immerse themselves. Like I think you said, Mandy, you can't be led by the hand with your imaginative work. You need to do a lot of the work yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the charms of reading just a regular old book.
Well, also that's radio theater though. So there's a whole bunch of other sensory like noises that are coming at you, which is different than an audiobook. Just so that we're clear.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure when we're talking.
And then then like for kids' picture books, again, because there aren't any words, it's up to the kid to put the words in themselves. There's a lot of gaps to fill when you're just looking at a series of pictures that the kid's imagination needs to work at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like if you were to have two different kids explain what's happening in a picture book, you're going to get very different answers from each of them because they're working through it in their head differently. And that's a really good thing.
Exactly. Yeah,
I actually think the more you guys, I thought of this a few minutes ago, and then the more you guys are saying the why don't I just say what I'm thinking? Mandy, say what you're thinking.
That's my struggle the entire episode.
I'm just saying you're confirming what my initial thought was, which is I think that wordless picture books, I have not done a study on this, but it seems to me that maybe it's better at teaching empathy because the child's brain has to interpret so much of what they're seeing just on the faces. Like Christina, you mentioned Noah in the wordless picture book, and and the giraffes. You weren't told with any words that they were sad. Exactly. And I mean, tears on a giraffe. Okay, you know they're sad because they're crying. But I mean, you had to learn that Noah's posture, what that meant. What does that mean that his head is in his hands? What does it mean? How do you know he's tired? The word doesn't say he's tired, but you knew he was tired. And so that is really interesting to me that that's something that is lost or maybe over assisted, and therefore it sort of skips over the child's connection in that way. Like the child's brain and heart have to connect with the picture in a more intimate way. And so that probably turns on a bit of whatever part of the brain is in charge of empathy. I would think that's probably firing those neurons of empathy.
Okay, I'm so excited. You are so right on this. Okay, I'm so glad you said this because this is exactly where I was like, yes, I'm going here. So because I was thinking about this the other day too. You know, I've worked a little bit in assisted education in the sense of like children who have some learning disorders or they just need occupational therapy. Sometimes like some autistic stuff. So I've kind of worked a little bit in that field, and I know that often these children who have a hard time reading emotions are often given pictures, right, of different faces, different expressions, like trying to help the child understand this is what a face looks like when it's upset. You know, how is Johnny feeling in this picture, right? Or this is a happy face. Do you see this smile? Can you make a happy face? Kind of like that. And then it starts to like build on that and read you some situations and say, all right, what face, you know. All that to say, I think you're absolutely right in that, Mandy. And I was doing my research on this because I'm a good girl. Also, I kind of like research. I'm kind of a nerd, but we all knew that too. It's fine. So I didn't realize this, but the human brain actually learns in 90% visual imagery. And there's more research coming out now that says that if we start to teach even some reading as like visual memorization, like seeing a word and memorizing the word itself, as opposed to trying to sound everything out phonetically, it's actually somewhat easier for us to build the reading skills. And that's why, like, even in my son's school, they have this thing called Fry sight words, which I didn't know existed because I grew up on phonics, but apparently it's very much a thing, and the research is backing it up. So, like, if we do learn in so many images, you know, and if our brain picks up on that and picks up on emotion and reading people, right, then the wordless picture book has like almost like a huge responsibility, but also like it's a huge benefit for a child. It's just really interesting. I was thinking about this and the whole phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I was like, oh, if the brain really learns in 90% visual imagery, like including memorizing words as pictures, that is really true. That is cool.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think about even though I couldn't, you know, when we talked about doing this podcast, I was thinking, what wordless picture books did we have? And I Googled, and I didn't even think of Goodnight Gorilla, but it's on a list of wordless picture books, even though he does say Goodnight Hyenas and all that. So it counts, apparently. And then the snowman, I totally forgot the snowman didn't have
I don't think I knew that one growing up. I didn't know that one.
Well, yeah. I was going to say it's when my kids were little, but you're not that much older than my kids. So anyway, yeah.
I'm Gutenberg's daughter, Mandy.
But the interesting thing is, so then I started thinking, well, I wonder if such and such book was wordless. Then I started remembering other books that I loved reading to the girls, and then I would look them up. And no, they had words, but then I was remembering, it's like my brain did the opposite, and I was like, oh wait, but I remember those pictures so well. It must not have had words.
Yes.
But I guess those are just the best picture books when the imagery is doing part of the work. Because I remember, like, one of the best books ever is called A Snowy Day, by Ezra.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's a
that
good
right?
one.
Yes.
That is a good
Side
one.
note,
Good.
first children's book ever to have a little African American character. But yeah, I mean, there are a few words in there, but it's so much the pictures. And I, when it was
Yeah.
the Christmas stamp a couple years ago, I bought, you guys, I have so many. I still have like 6 books of those forever stamps because I love that book so much. So I feel like even if it's not a wordless picture book, I think the best picture books are the ones where, without the pictures, there it's less of a story, if that makes sense, And so I was thinking, are you guys familiar with the book Frederick by Leo Leone? A lot of people are not, so I'm on kind of a campaign.
I feel like I heard.
Yeah.
I have this vague memory of like LeVar Burton saying it when I'm a kid,
Okay.
but I don't know much about the book.
I typically, when a young mom is having a baby at my church, I always get Frederick, and it's from the 60s. I think it's older than me. I think it's from like 65 or something. But it's a little mouse, and the illustrations are the key, even though there are words. And so I think illustrators of children's books are doing so much more for our children's brains and ours than we realize.
I know. And I think yes, I think you're 100% correct. And sorry, my bag is falling against my leg. Sorry about the excess noise.
Sound effects.
My bag that I have with me of all the wordless picture books that I'm so excited about. But no, I think you're right. Let's see. Oh, there was another thing I wanted to ask you guys about, and that is, I've noticed that in the trend of more of the modern wordless picture books, it's often it's very narrative driven, but it's also fantastical, right? So there's a lot of fantasy elements. There's a lot of girls or boys going on a particular adventure, and you have to sort of go with this character in the pictures, go on these adventures. And as you do, of course, you're unconsciously being that child, right? And what if it would be like if I was this little girl who got caught up into this hot air balloon who was chased by a knight, and when I jumped off the ledge, a bird came and saved me or something like that,
Right.
It's really, really interesting. But I was just kind of wondering what you guys think, especially both of you being authors, about the surge in sort of fantasy and how that is becoming a part of children's literature, even in the form of wordless picture books. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that off the top of your head, but there's a couple things that I keep thinking of. There's one I got for my daughter for Christmas called Free Fall. And it's about a little boy in a dream, and he falls asleep, and there's chess pieces next to him and a map, like an atlas, because he loves looking at atlases. And again, you infer all this just from the first picture. But then his entire dream is from all the things that were in that first picture. And it makes you remember, like, as a child, like, you remember you fall asleep, and the things that you were thinking about before you fell asleep are often in your dreams, right? So
that made me think about, that just made me think about Harold and the Purple Crayon. Are y'all familiar?
I love that one. Another wordless one.
I love Harold and the Purple Crayon.
There are 4.
Yeah.
Yes.
I absolutely love it. And my girls absolutely loved it. And,
Yep.
So I feel like at the end of this, we need to give like recommendations. But anyway, that made me think of like the go along with Harold. Here we go. And especially because whatever he draws becomes the adventure. And the girls absolutely loved it when he would draw the water and then fall in the water.
And then fall into it. then he'd have to draw a boat for
himself by drawing a boat. Yeah. Anyway, but that's very old. That's from like the 50s. I don't know about the books from today. I'm old. What about what fantasy books do you have, Matthew, for your kids? Do you have any?
Oh man, well, I can say like I can think of a lot of these too, where like the little kid goes into like this little magic. It's usually like a dreamlike world, right? And I think that works very well because it will grab the kid's attention and it's more immersive. So they need to really dive into this weird world, try to figure out the rules of it, try to see like, oh, there's like a chess piece and a dragon over here, but it all kind of fits together. Why does it do that? And it's the sort of thing that really rewards close viewing. I think that's really the key to a really successful children's picture book.
Yes. And the same with it, being a successful illustrator / author of a wordless picture book. So
can I throw in a little side adventure that I've been thinking of?
Yes.
Okay, so I was thinking about wordless like TV shows, movies, or short films. Because I think these trigger a lot of the same things.
Okay.
And I'm thinking of that movie, I think it's like a French film from the 50s, The Red Balloon. I remember watching it in first grade, and it's about half an hour long. And it's just this balloon floating around a town, and that's the story, and there's no words. I remember my teacher warning us before we started, like, hey, guys, there's no words here. So you need to pay really close attention. If you look down to like color something, you're going to miss something.
Wow.
So it like drove like the fact that it was wordless almost made it more serious. It's like, ooh, I need to pay close attention now. And I get that same feeling. A show that me and my kids really, really love is Shaun the Sheep from Aardman Studios.
Is that the Wallace and Gromit guy?
Exactly. It's the Wallace and Gromit guys who do that. And again, it's about a flock of sheep. There's like a herding dog. There's a farmer, but the farmer doesn't say anything except for like, so there's no dialogue, but you still have to follow the story. And it's really funny. It's really clever. And being witty and clever with no words is really tricky, but they really do it. And again, when those are on, my kid's attention is just like laser focused in.
Yeah.
There's no like looking over to like play with a toy or something like that. It's locked in because it has to be. That the fact that it doesn't have words really means that you have to pay attention.
Yeah.
So true. It's interesting. And I know there's people way more qualified than any of us to talk about that and how the brain works.
I don't know if there are.
More qualified than Matt Mellema? I don't know.
I mean, we're on a podcast, but yes, you were talking about the importance of attention in children. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just saying people way more qualified because I think there is so much here that the three of us can't even begin to mine as far as how the brain works and really how the resurgence of wordless picture books in children and especially in today's culture can really, really help them developmentally and emotionally, narratively, building confidence, building a storytelling, building imagination, etc. So I wish I knew someone I could just pull off the streets and say, "Hey, come talk to us. This is amazing." But I don't.
Is she suggesting kidnapping? That's what I just heard.
Well, it makes me think there's this scene in this movie Mitchells versus the Machines where there's this little kid who loves dinosaurs. So he just like calls through the phone book. Hello, do you want to talk about dinosaurs with me?
Oh,
no? Okay, then he calls the next one. Hello, do you want... That can be Christina's approach here.
Cute.
Do it.
I love it. So I think there's a couple of things we're running low on time, so I wanted to just say a couple last things to close. Because we could obviously talk about this for a very long time, but like I said, we are unqualified to do so. But I did want to make a plug for a book that I found just in a random bookstore, and I put it on the Christmas list for my kids, and I found it, and it is called The Storyteller's Handbook. It's created by Elise Hurst, and the foreword is by Neil Gaiman. And what it is an entire book of 2-page spreads of the most whimsical scenes that you could possibly imagine. And it actually asks the reader / the person who's looking at these pictures to interpret in his very own way what is happening. So it's not just this pictures tell narrative. It's the pictures invite the reader to tell a story based on what he or she sees. And I absolutely love it. And I wanted to give it a plug because I don't know anything about the author / illustrator, but she has a very Anselmian approach to story and imagination and narrative. And so I just want to read you a quick blurb of what she says here. She says, "I've always been awed by the power of stories. They are how we make sense of our lives, our fears, our memories, our hopes, our experiences, and our questions. They give us a voice. Stories allow us to experiment with ideas, learn empathy, and build understanding. They connect us both to the real world and our dream world. They're doorways with no limits to where they might lead." And then she says, "This is a handbook to fire your imagination and your creativity. You can open this book at any time on any page." Let's see. And then she says, "An easy way to start is to ask yourself when you look at a page, what and why and how and who about the things you see. You might ask yourself, what just happened? What happens next? What is just off the edge of this page? No one in the world will answer the same as you, and that is exciting. When you let your imagination fly, who knows where it will take you? With all my heart, I wish you well on your storytelling journey." So it's this really, really amazing. And of course, the very beginning is this picture of this massive, larger than life-size cat with a little girl sitting on a bench in front of a window looking very forlorn. And the cat is, I don't know, it's hard to explain without seeing the book, but I highly recommend it. And
because you need visuals. Visuals are important.
And exactly. Yeah. Dun, dun, dun. So anyway, without further ado, I should ask you guys if you have any last tie-ups and all that. But otherwise, I think we can just let this wonderful episode speak for itself.
Yeah, I'm good. I think I said.
All right. Yeah, go for it. Do our closing and let me know if there's any wording disagreements.
Wait, let me polish off. I have to polish off my final glass. Go ahead.
All right. And trundle home.
You ready, Mandy? Polish it off, and then I'll read.
Yeah.
Ding! Ding! Clink! Very well done. Very well done.
Thank you.
Well, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire is down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once Again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. To find out more about the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And while you're at it, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next time.